country to their goods, but they put up massive barriers. And that's not free trade, that's stupid trade.
You think that his policies are kind of why you have a job today?
I know it is. Wish I could made them.
What would you say?
Thank you. Love you, man.
Trump tells me, personally, he's a free trader. I believe him. No, does it scare me?
Yes? He scares you.
Oh, he scares me all the time.
Effective right now. It's time for change.
President Trump campaigned on a promise to help American workers by renegotiating global trade deals.
We lose a fortune on trade. The United States loses with everybody. I don't mind trade wars when we're losing $58 billion a year. You want to know the truth. We're losing so much.
He said the U.S. was being cheated and promised that with his bargaining skills, he could negotiate better deals. Then in March, he followed through on this rhetoric by slapping tariffs on imported steel and aluminum.
And now we're finally taking action to correct this long overdue problem.
It was the first step in what could develop into a global trade war.
Trump sending shockwaves through Washington and around the world.
Les réponses unilatérales et les menaces de guerre commerciale ne régleront rien des graves déséquilibres du commerce mondial. Rien.
Michael Monahan traveled the country to see how Trump's moves are affecting people on both sides of the tariffs.
Issue since Donald Trump entered the political arena that he's been consistent on, and that's the issue of trade. This aluminum plant shut its doors in 2016 and 800 people lost their jobs, but now 2 years later they're hiring again, and they're citing Donald Trump's trade policy as the reason why. How many of you guys worked here and lost your jobs in 2016? Everyone. And all of you were rehired?
Yes.
So I assume all of you support the president's policy with regard to aluminum tariffs?
Yes.
Yeah? 100%?
100%. We've got to make America great again.
That phrase means something to you?
Yes, sir. It means a lot. And we can support ourselves without depending on other countries.
That's right. Yeah.
It wasn't working out too well in 2016 for us. He got elected, and now it's working out for us. So,
right. Yeah.
These are my biological families, but them guys out there, it's my family too.
What was that feeling like when you walked out of here for that last time?
Lost. Even when you're walking out, you're thinking this ain't happening. You know, ain't no way.
The president can say, to bring industry back and to bring jobs back and to bring factories back.
Yeah.
Did you believe him?
I was putting all my eggs in his basket, and I was saying, come on, boy, get her done. And he done exactly what he said he was going to do.
You think that his policies are kind of why you have a job today?
I know it is.
You know it is?
Yeah. I wouldn't have his job if it didn't happen. Wish I could made him. I'd give him a big old hug. You know?
What would you say?
Tell him, keep on doing what you're doing, boy. You're doing a fine job, President Trump. Thank you. Love you, man. Means a lot.
You feel the same?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He wears that hat around and says, make America great again. And, I mean, he's really holding up to it. Yeah. Not only is he wearing it around, he's doing it.
For both steel and aluminum workers, the tariffs are undoubtedly working. By raising the price of imports, the tariffs have made these industries more competitive. But while Trump's policy might save these jobs, critics contend they'll kill jobs in other sectors.
I hope the president doesn't really do this, because if he does, it's just going to be a huge tax on American citizens.
And start a trade war that would hit the wallets of American consumers.
The cost of your flat screen TVs are going up. The cost of your medical devices are going up.
The administration fired back at its critics.
The downstream effects of steel and aluminum tariffs are insignificant.
Coca-Cola has 3 cents worth of aluminum in it. So if that goes up 10%, that's 0.3 of a cent.
Are you going to back down on the tariffs? No, we're not backing down.
Tariff proponents accuse China, whose industries are propped up by the state and have significantly lower labor costs, of dumping cheap steel and aluminum on the U.S. market, causing prices to fall and forcing American companies out of business. One company that raised this issue was Century Aluminum, which strenuously lobbied the Trump administration to tariff its foreign competitors. Since the tariffs went into effect, Century has ramped up production and said it plans to hire 300 new employees. Century CEO Mike Bless claims that Chinese dumping nearly destroyed the domestic aluminum industry.
The excess production that was going on in the world, a lot of it driven from China, tipped over the market, right?
And you had millions and millions and millions of tons that were sitting in warehouses all around the world because it had no place else to go. And market participants looked at that and said, that's a recipe for disaster. And the aluminum price crashed by 40% on that basis.
At one point, both ourselves and our peers had announced that we were closing the entire industry.
The industry was going to go.
100% of those smelters had been announced for closure. 85% of the demand in this country for primary aluminum is now imports. Do we want to go to 100%? Is that in the interest? This is just leveling the playing field. That's all it is.
It's actually the ricochet effects of this that are so troubling. Soybeans produced around here, right?
Yeah.
We export almost most of our soybeans to China.
Understand.
Tariffs going to come in on that.
Look, we can't comment on the broader aspects of this.
But you do acknowledge that the broader aspects do exist.
They exist. All we can say is that this problem was acute, and finally we have an administration willing to stand up and do something about it.
So your job is to save jobs in your industry?
Absolutely. It's above our pay grade to worry about whether there will be impacts in some of these other industries or not.
As expected, China responded by initially slapping tariffs on $50 billion worth of American products. On the top of that list, soybeans. We spoke with Iowa soybean farmer Dave Walton as he prepared for another planting season.
China buys soybeans grown in Iowa, so it's one of the largest exports from the U.S. to China, and it's one of the biggest grain imports into China. So from their perspective, it was a natural place to start.
So they're retaliating by going after your business?
Correct. You know, you walk up to the biggest guy in the bar, punch him in the nose, step back and see how he reacts, and they're going to punch you back. They're going to say, all right, we're going to put tariffs on this.
Beijing imported almost $13 billion worth of soybeans from American farmers in 2017. With China promising a 25% retaliatory tariff, Walton will have to search for new markets for one of his staple products.
What's a good wage for somebody running a farm like this?
On an average year, you're probably doing 50, 60. That's about what we expect to make this year.
And if those tariffs go through?
It could go to zero.
The Trump administration announced tariffs on another $200 billion worth of Chinese products.
打贸易战的结果只能是两败俱伤。
And predictably, China vowed to retaliate.
中方绝不会坐视合法权益受到损害，必将采取所有必要措施。
But it wasn't just China that Trump targeted. To the surprise of even his own supporters in Congress, the White House announced potential tariffs on America's closest allies.
The European Union is brutal to the United States. They don't take, and they understand that. They know it. When I'm telling them, they're smiling at me. You know, it's like the gig is up.
In response, even America's docile northern neighbor threatened to tariff hundreds of American goods.
It is not something we relish doing, but it is something that we absolutely will do because Canadians, we're polite, we're reasonable, but we also will not be pushed around.
Because of the retaliatory tariffs being threatened by both China and America's allies, the list of potentially affected American industries kept growing. The estimates vary, but all projections come to the same dark conclusion. tariffs could significantly increase the price of both domestic and foreign goods and lead to significant job loss. Economist Laura Tyson was the chair of President Clinton's Council of Economic Advisors, and along with over 1,100 other economists from both the right and left, she signed a public letter decrying Trump's trade policy.
So you signed a letter along with over 1,000 other economists.
Yes, I think 15, 16 Nobel laureates. We essentially quoted the letter from about 1,000 economists in 1930 against Smoot-Hawley. Their warnings were exactly these warnings. You will cause higher prices, you will encourage retaliation, you will slow down global trade, and that will be a negative for growth and a negative for employment. You'll create some possible winners, the protected, but a whole bunch of losers.
We're talking to China. We had a $375 billion trade deficit. That's not good.
When he measures whether trade is unfair or not, he frequently just looks at the size of the imports and says, oh, well, we import a lot more from them than we export to them. That must be unfair.
Trade deficit.
That's a trade deficit, it's unfair. And that balanced trade is what you should have. No. Trade is, at the end of the day, mutually beneficial. We need them, they need us. The jobs that he says we lost through trade and that we can bring back through protection are jobs we actually lost through automation. So we have a manufacturing sector that today is producing twice as much as 1984, but with a third reduction of the workforce. We don't need that many people anymore to produce that output because we have much more sophisticated ways of doing it through technology. China exploiting us, or that's unfair trade, or that's all an import from China, it just is not the case.
But Trump is wagering that thousands of economists are wrong, and that America can tariff its way to a healthy manufacturing sector. And he singled out one emblematically American product that he thinks should be made in the USA.
We're going to have Apple start to make their iPhones and their computers and everything else they make in this country, not in China.
But is it even possible for one country to produce a cell phone?
I think people have this feeling that there's a factory, there's a building, and the raw material flows into one side of the building and an iPhone comes out the other side, and it just doesn't work that way.
We visited Kyle Wiens, whose company iFixit teaches customers how to hack their electronics, to see what it would take to bring iPhone production to the US.
All right, so this iPhone screen, the LCD was made by Sharp in Japan. The infamous battery, I'm reasonably confident that this was made in China. If there was one thing that we wanted to bring home, I think would be a relatively easy thing to start making batteries in the US.
So a bit of advice for Donald Trump.
He likes Tesla.
He loves coal, too.
He loves coal. The headphone speaker, same story. This is the back panel of the phone. This is made in China. I put
There's going to be a little pile
China.
of stuff in China, thus proving Donald Trump's point that they're eating our lunch.
The rear-facing camera made by Sony in Japan. A dialogue semiconductor part designed in Germany. This is a baseband amplifier, and this is made by TDK in Taiwan. Getting crowded in Taiwan. The antennas that power the iPhone are a company out of Massachusetts called Skyworks, but they do manufacture parts in Mexico. The A10 processor. It's based on IP that Apple licensed from the UK-based company. Apple's design team is actually in Israel. It is manufactured in Taiwan, but there is RAM inside it that was made in Korea.
It's really, really hard to make an iPhone.
Absolutely.
But even if all iPhone component manufacturing was brought to the United States, the over 50 elements needed to make those components are sourced from around the globe.
Thinking that tariffs are the magical tool that is bringing the entire supply chain, the entire ecosystem of the United States, is a task that's larger than even Apple could accomplish.
The expansion of global trade has helped move 1 billion people out of extreme poverty since 1990. There's a near unanimity amongst economists that the benefits of trade far outweigh the drawbacks. And it's an opinion held by many of those advising President Trump. Art Laffer is a conservative icon. The free-trading, free-market-loving economist was one of the architects of Reagan's tax cuts and is the godfather of trickle-down economics.
The trade deficit is the most wonderful thing in the world. It's foreign capital coming in, which is used to employ Americans. The silliest thing I can think of is trying to get rid of the trade deficit of the U.S.
You talked to the president. Why do you not explain this to him?
I do.
But why is he's out banging on about the trade deficit all the time?
People listen to a message, they make their own decision. He's the president, I'm not.
But he's wrong about it.
I don't know that to be true. Trump tells me personally he's a free trader. I believe him. I see no reason to doubt that. He's trying to get their attention, bang, so we really get true free trade. I believe. Now, does it scare me? Yes.
He scares you.
Oh, he scares me all the time.
Do you tell him, Mr. President, this rhetoric?
Yes.
I understand what you're doing, but it scares me.
Yes, of course I do. Why not? I'm terrified of a trade war. Protectionism is a killer, and it kills your industries that are protected, and it kills your economy. Do I think we should be at a trade war and treat China like an enemy? No. I think of China as America's best friend. I love China. Without China, there is no Walmart. And without Walmart, there is no middle class or lower class prosperity in America. There just plain isn't. But do I believe he knows what he's doing? Yeah, he's amazing.
How is it that you are supporting the president right now?
Rhetoric is rhetoric.
This is the one thing he's been consistent on for 30 years.
I may be wrong in that. I may be misjudging him. He may want to go to war, and he may think he can win a trade war. I don't believe he does.
Your hope is that Donald Trump doesn't believe what he says.
I want to make sure you understand that to take Donald Trump literally is, I think, a huge mistake. Do you take my view of Trump on trade seriously in the sense
I
that...
take it seriously. I don't know if I agree with
That's fair, and I don't know if I agree with me either.
The problem is global leaders are taking him literally. After the initial announcement to tariff steel and aluminum imports, the White House quickly exempted Canada, Mexico, and the EU. But in June, Trump stunned America's allies, allowing those exemptions to expire and opening up multiple new fronts in the trade war.
I think the European Union is a foe, what they do to us in trade. Now, you wouldn't think of the European Union, but they're a foe.
Since January, global tariff threats have expanded from 18 products worth roughly $4 billion to a staggering 10,000 products worth almost $400 billion. And the list keeps growing. And when Trump threatened to add European cars to that list, the EU came to the negotiating table.
So we're starting the negotiation right now, but we know very much where it's going.
Agreeing to a temporary ceasefire and further negotiations. But Trump was under increasing political pressure at home and from members of his own party.
It's a bad deal, all the way around. Bad for the taxpayers, horrible for farmers.
Tariffs always hurt us.
In 2016, Tennessee Senator Bob Corker was on Trump's short list to be vice president. But Corker's support for his fellow Republican wasn't unconditional.
It's inappropriate just to be willy-nilly throwing tariffs around and changing your mind, and that's not the way you deal with economic issues like that.
Massive amounts of foreign direct investment has created more jobs in Tennessee than in any other state. One of the largest foreign employers in the state is Volkswagen, whose plant in Chattanooga created 3,000 jobs.
When I was a senator, one of my first calls was to Volkswagen, and we ultimately were able to attract them here.
That was a fairly big achievement.
Oh, you have no idea. I mean, for Volkswagen to finally announce was no doubt the most emotionally impactful thing that's happened.
I mean, you seem slightly emotional about it now.
Yeah.
And we have a president of your own party whose policies might impact these people's lives.
Yeah, I think there's some 157,000 jobs potentially in Tennessee that might be affected. That's a lot of jobs. For why we would consider penalizing people who are helping create American jobs is beyond me.
The current policies of the current administration, how would that impact this plant?
Well, some of the parts come from Japan, some of the parts come from Europe, some of the parts come from Mexico. So the price of automobiles that are being produced here will go up. It'll make them less competitive. All of these things are very price sensitive, and that means there'll be less demand. And what it'll do is put Americans out of work.
What are you proposing?
It's very simple. We're saying you've got to come to Congress after you negotiate the tariff so that we can approve them. Because again, it's an abuse of his authorities.
Corker introduced a bipartisan bill that would give Congress limited oversight of Trump's trade policy. He claims it stalled due to White House pressure.
United States senators that are elected by the people in their state don't want to cast a tough vote. We can't vote on the Corker Amendment because we'd be upsetting the president. I can't believe it.
I think intellectually, there would be 51 Republican senators that would agree that this is not coherent. I would
politically.
But politically, the issue is that you've got a very popular president in the Republican base, and challenging that currently with midterm elections coming up is not something many of them want to do.
But it's something politicians from across the aisle are happy to do, especially those representing areas that will be hardest hit.
The majority of nails that are manufactured in this country come from a company called Mid-Continent Nail Corporation in Poplar Bluff, Missouri.
Mid-Continent Nail Corporation, an economic engine in an economically depressed community, has in the past 5 years doubled in size. But since the tariffs went into effect, they've laid off 60 people, with more layoffs possible.
In the months since the implementation of the tariffs, Mid-Continent has lost 70% of its business, and they're using everything in their power, including calling on the media and calling on their senator, Claire McCaskill, and they're hoping that can save them.
Tell me about how long you guys think you have until you've got to lay off more.
Hopefully we don't have to make any more cuts. We just need relief as quick as possible because every day it's a financial burden on our parent company.
For years, Mid-Continent fought Chinese metal dumping with lawsuits. It's now reduced to begging the government for an exclusion from the new tariffs.
This is a 3-alarm fire for jobs in our state. A good family company bought this facility, and there is absolutely no reason that they should be forced to lay people off or to go out of business because of tariffs that have been applied in a way that are going to do more damage than they're going to do good.
Traditionally, the people who take a shower after work rather than before work, that has been the soul of our party. We lost credibility with those folks, and shame on us. Many of these people probably have never voted for me, and maybe they never will. That's not why I'm here.
What do you say to those voters in your own state that see President Trump as the answer to these problems?
He clearly thinks this is a quote-unquote winner, and that this is winning, but it doesn't feel like winning to these folks.
An hour from here is an aluminum smelter that we visited last month who are hiring a lot of people, and they love these tariffs, and you represent them too.
If we save 300, 400, 500 jobs up the road, and we lose 5, 6, 10,000 jobs in Missouri, I'm not sure that overall that's a good thing.
You're at 60% capacity now? Right today we are, yes. Our problem is next month, our order file is so low that it will be significantly less than that. What happened in 2 weeks, I thought wouldn't happen for 2 months.
Why did it happen so fast?
Because the customer that buys our product literally could not take the 19% tariff surcharge that we had to apply to the invoice on top of the price that they were already paying us for a made in the USA product. So we really have been in crisis management mode for the last 3.5 weeks.
80% of this Missouri county voted for Trump, including every employee we spoke with.
What would happen if your job went away? What would you do?
I have no idea.
You voted for him?
I voted for him.
Yeah. You voted for him knowing this kind of trade policy might affect you, right?
I didn't think about our raw material.
This is a terrible policy then for you.
I'm not a politician.
You think it's the tariffs, though.
I am for fair trade. Mm-hmm. Do I think we ought to give the man a chance? I think so. Does it suck? Yeah, it sucks.
I just read in the paper yesterday that there was a place up in Cape Girardeau laid off some people because we quit buying their product.
That's the ripple effects of this.
Yeah.
So what happens if this entire plant closes down? Where do you go?
I don't know.
4 years ago, Mid-Continent opened a second factory across the road to meet growing demand. It now stands empty, housing dusty machines and unsold product.
This is the paper tape plant that we shut down 2 weeks ago. One little action, made by our own government, overnight turned our business to a point to where it's what you see today. We're standing inside of a shuttered plant that 2 weeks ago, every machine in here running, and now today, lights off and nothing going on.
There is a real possibility that the plant could shut down if these tariffs stay the way they are, right? I mean, you can answer that one, right?
So is that a possibility? Of course it's a possibility. We're very fortunate that the owners of this company own a large business that allows them to make a long-term call on this. We don't see the tariff lasting, forever. If we were a public company, we might have already shut it down. There's going to be lots of other companies our size that are going to have the same kind of problem.
The economy is healthy. Unemployment is at its lowest level since 1969.
I am thrilled to announce that in the second quarter of this year, the United States economy grew at the amazing rate of 4.1%.
But there's near consensus amongst economists that this prosperity is under grave threat, and that President Trump, with the stroke of a pen, could potentially cripple the American economy.
It's easy to rip stuff up and throw bombs. That takes no work at all, but I know for sure they are making it up as they go along.
I don't think anybody really quite believed we would be at this place right now.
But we're here.
He basically threatens. We are such a big economy. We're the bully. We're the bully. Okay, we're the big economy. You guys need us. It's easy for us to win trade wars because we're us.
I feel very comfortable with Donald Trump's rhetoric and with what he has done so far. Now, can you get me to agree a year from now after he causes the Great Depression? Yes, you can get me to be opposed to it. But right now, I just don't see that in him.
Just stick with us. Don't believe the crap you see from these people, the fake news.